and he took his gun out. And because I also had the gun with me, I just did the same. And he proceeded to go upstairs, and I just followed him upstairs to the master bedroom.
It's Tuesday, it's January 20th, 2026. We have a lot to cover today because we are going to court. You've been asking for live court. You've been asking for coverage of this case. And I thought this case was going to take substantially longer than it looks like it's taking. But that's okay because we have days of Zoom rooms. So yes, we are going to go to Virginia. So what case are we here for today? Well, law nerds of the jury, we are on the criminal docket today. We are going to court in Fairfax County, Virginia. Judge Ascarate presiding. You might remember Judge A from the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case. The defendant on trial is Brendan Banfield. He is charged with the murder of his wife and Joseph Ryan. What is unique about this case that we have not seen in some other cases is that, one, the prosecution pretty clearly states that they believe they know what the motive is, and we will hear about the motive. But also, we have not covered, I don't think, many cases where we have a co-defendant testifying. Kind of in the Adelson case, but because it was a murder for hire and because there was so much differentiation between like who knew who, it was kind of there. But this is a case where we have a co-defendant who flipped who is testifying. So we're going to see some of that testimony today, and then all day, day 2 of trial, which we will cover tomorrow. And then we're going to try to zoom and catch up in real time. This trial started last Tuesday. Court ran Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They were dark on Friday. We love Judge A for that. And then, of course, for MLK Day yesterday, they were also dark. So we are going to be moving very quickly in real time to catch up. The prosecution is going to lay out their theory of the case. Opening statements are pretty brief, but what the prosecution is alleging here is that the defendant in this case started an affair with his au pair, well, the family's au pair that was living in their home, who had come to the U.S. from Brazil to work in their house providing childcare. She is going to be testifying in this trial and took a deal to do so. So the husband is accused of murdering the wife and another individual. We're going to hear more about the other individual in the opening statements. There are some details in opening as I was zooming through it that I could not avoid. So I'm going to give you just a heads up that the other individual murdered here is a fall guy. There is going to be descriptions throughout this case about the fall guy being set up by the husband to engage in some very specific types of sex. And so you are going to hear descriptions of that. If that is something that is going to be uncomfortable, skip through some of the prosecution's opening statement. But again, we are going to go through the opening statements. I want to give a warning that those are topics that are going to come up, but I also don't want to give you the entire prosecution opening statement because we're just going to go to the prosecution. So the case is one of the more interesting attempts at relieving yourself of a spouse that I have seen.
We're here today because Brendan Banfield, the man seated behind me, killed his wife, Christine Banfield, and another man named Joseph Ryan. Those two individuals had no reason to know each other, but for the plotting and planning of Brendan Banfield. Christine, back in 2022, was 37 years old. She was an ICU nurse working at Inova Fairfax. She was married to Brendan, who was then 38, and they had a daughter, 4-year-old Valerie. Christine worked odd shifts. She was a nurse. If any of you know what nurses' hours are, she could work nights. The schedule was irregular. It didn't occur with a 9-to-5 pattern, so regular daycare was not an option for the family. They hired an au pair, Juliana Peres Magalhães. She was from Brazil. She was 22 years old when she joined the family. She provided care while Brendan traveled for work and Christine worked her nurse's hours. The family lived in the Reston area of Fairfax County at 13230 Stablebrook Way. You'll hear that address referenced. You'll see pictures of the home. You'll have the opportunity to understand what the layout of the house was, as it is very relevant to what happened in February of 2023. Taking you back, in August of 2022, Brendan began an affair with Juliana. Initially, it was just sex when Christine was at work or asleep, but eventually it developed into a relationship. They went on dates. They went to bars, clubs, dancing. They went on romantic bike rides. By the fall of 2022, they were fully in love, planning their future. On a trip to New York, Brendan revealed his desire to get rid of Christine. Divorce was not an option for him. He didn't want to lose custody of Valerie. He didn't even want to share custody of Valerie. He thought Christine was a terrible mother. He wanted her out of the picture. And he convinced young Juliana, 22 years old, not from the United States, living in his home, in love with him, that they should get rid of Christine. He talked about hiring a hitman, finding someone to kill her for money. But he was concerned that that would tie back to him, that there would be too much evidence against him and that he could end up at risk. So they crafted a plan. They would use Christine's email accounts to create a fake profile to lure someone in who was into kinky sex, violent sex. And they would get this guy to come into the house and fake rape Christine. Brendan would be the hero of the day. He would show up, kill the guy, kill his wife, pretending that it had been that guy. That was the plan. They put it into action. Brendan created a FetLife account. If you're not familiar with it, it's a social networking app for people interested in fetishes, sexual kink. He posted as Christine, seeking fulfillment of this stranger rape fantasy. He and Juliana spent weeks chatting with potential victims, searching for just the right guy who would follow Brendan's plan to a T. Because remember, this plan hinged on several things. Christine never knowing that it existed, and Christine never being expected to meet with her potential fake rapist. In this community of people, there weren't many takers for such a risky plan. It had red flags all over the place. But by January 24th, 2022, Brendan had found his target, Joseph Ryan, posting as Taco Supreme 7000. Joe engaged in friendly conversation with who he thought was an attractive woman new to kink. Brendan, posting as Christine, spent a month creating this relationship with Joe that would eventually lead to Joe's murder. Meanwhile, other things were going on to prepare for this murder. Brendan bought Juliana a gun and took her to the shooting range to teach her to shoot. Brendan had Juliana help him test out the soundproofing of the new windows that had been installed at Stablebrook Way. By the time this plan was ready to be hatched, Joe was fully on board. He had not questioned any of the asks of him. He had continued to engage in this relationship and appeared to be the perfect willing victim. Brendan created the narrative that Christine desperately wanted to be raped. Posing as Christine, he told Joe what to do. Come to the home in Reston. The door will be unlocked. Christine will be asleep in bed. Come straight upstairs, cut off her clothing, tie her, rape her. Simple and fun. That was how it was posed. Joe was willing to follow these rules that Brendan set out posing as Christine. They would not meet in person beforehand. Joe's phones would be left in the car. Joe was to bring a knife, zip ties, chains. And most importantly, he was not to stop. Even if she looked terrified, even if she was calling for help, he was to follow through because that's what she really wanted. On February 24th, 2023, Brendan Banfield's birthday, the plan was put into action. Knowing that Christine had the day off, Brendan and Juliana arranged a fake outing for the zoo a fake outing at the zoo for Valerie. Juliana and Valerie packed a lunch, prepared for this fake outing. Christine, still in bed, asleep, at 6 a.m., Brendan takes her phone and Valerie downstairs. He chats with Joe to confirm a 7:20 arrival for the execution of the fake rape. And Brendan then disables the door lock, preventing it from automatically locking, turns off Christine's phone, and puts it in a drawer in the kitchen where she couldn't possibly find it to call for help when she finds an intruder in her home. Brendan leaves the house, followed shortly by Juliana. Brendan drives to a nearby McDonald's. Juliana waits in the cul-de-sac. The plan to give a call out to Brendan as soon as she sees Joe. Valerie's in the back seat, and Juliana has a gun in her pocket. When Joe arrives, Juliana calls Christine's cell phone first to create a record of a fake warning, even knowing that the phone is turned off. She then calls Brendan to let him know that Joe is in the house. Brendan leaves the McDonald's, drives directly to the home, meets up with Juliana, and with Valerie in tow, they re-enter the house through the basement. Juliana, nervous, screws up the plan and calls 911, too early. She hangs up as soon as Brendan's giving her the signal that this wasn't the plan. They leave Valerie in the basement. They sneak up the stairs to the bedroom where they hear Joe Ryan and Christine. Brendan enters the bedroom first, shooting Joe in the head, picks up the knife that Joe had brought, and stabs Christine repeatedly in the neck. He directs Juliana to shoot Joe a second time with her gun. This time the bullet enters Joe's chest. With Christine dead or dying, Brendan spends the next several minutes manipulating Joe Ryan's body, in the process leaving Christine's blood on Joe's hands and pants. Juliana calls 911, this time as scheduled, to report the intruder, and Brendan tells the police, "I shot him, he stabbed her." You'll hear all of this from Juliana, but we're not asking you to believe her alone. Because while Juliana presents us with the narrative, that story that we wouldn't necessarily know but for her details, it is the blood evidence that you can rely upon without a doubt. The blood cannot lie. And the blood puts Brendan Banfield standing over Christine, stabbing her in the neck until she died. With that evidence, we will ask you to find Brendan Banfield guilty of these murders, the associated charges of neglecting his child, and of creating a danger for her in that home.
There's some interesting things that, in order to assess, first of all, what they're saying, and second of all, the evidence that's going to be before you, is you have to look at certain timelines. So the murder of Christine Banfield by Joe Ryan occurred on February 24th, 2023. The arrest of Juliana Perez Magalhães took place in October of 2023. She was held for nearly another year before she made the statements that are the full and complete support of what the Commonwealth just told you. And she did that because the Commonwealth decided that they were going to give her something certain. They were going to give her a plea of guilty to a manslaughter, which is a lesser included offense, and guaranteed time served upon her testimony here today or tomorrow or whenever that testimony is. You're going to hear a timeline of events and evidence that you'll have an opportunity to look at, where she was arrested in October of 2023, and the whole reason she was arrested was to flip her against my client. You'll hear that evidence from someone other than her and other than me. They had an affair. You're not going to get any disputes from us. But he played a role, a supportive role to her while she was in jail, while they tried to do their little experiment on what would she take in order to come forward and tell a story. Any of you who have any sort of investigative roles in anything that you do, when you're talking to someone who's deciding to flip, you don't just take their word for it, you challenge them. Investigators challenge the statements that are being made. And so October 25th marks the first day that statements were made. Many of you may have seen that because it's showing up on media. And you hear someone asking her questions and then she answers those questions. Well, what we're going to be able to show you is that those answers are wrong based upon other evidence that we have in this case. But no one ever challenged her, no one ever questioned her. And so in order to have this narrative and this story that you received, Juliana Perez Magalhães is at the center of all of it. The Commonwealth used her for their case. I understand the situation that she's in, and I understand the fact that she's away from home and she's young and she's dependent on people. And she's also depending on the Commonwealth. And they've put her in this situation. And she's accepted it gladly. And I'm sorry to say, many people would. But it's the devastation that causes when you ask for that kind of testimony to be included in your case. Let's just talk a little bit about some of the other things that are going on in this case. And I think you'll find this through the evidence. So what essentially, and you may have heard it in media, is there's a theory called catfishing. And catfishing, for those who don't know it, and people more experienced and more expert than I will be able to tell you specifically, essentially is assuming the devices of someone in order to get something done, is the easy quick. There's probably more sophisticated explanation for it. But what they're saying is Brendan Banfield assumed his wife's devices, his computer, her phone, any other devices, in order to take on take on her persona in order to invite this gentleman, Joe Ryan, in. Catfishing is a theory that requires a conclusion that Christine Banfield gave up her devices. The Commonwealth's experts have concluded from the moment that the devices were examined and extracted that she did not give up her devices. And so then started the turmoil within the police department that I think is going to come out here. I doubt it'll be in the Commonwealth's case, but there were people within the command staff who were trying to change what the experts said about Christine Banfield's devices. They were trying to say that Christine Banfield did give up these devices or was away when those devices were being used. But you're going to have a conclusion that was from the very early moments that she had not given that up. When this case started, there were 12 people in the homicide squad. As this case goes to trial now, there's only 4 of those 12 there. Important ones that were removed in part because they didn't agree with the people that peddled the catfish theory, the lead homicide detective, the digital forensics detective. And this was back in late 2024. I don't know how many of you are familiar with criminal prosecutions and investigations. I was a prosecutor myself here in Fairfax. I've never experienced a homicide investigation where the lead homicide detective was moved prior to a trial. Ultimately, it's the evidence. It's not what I say. It's not what the Commonwealth says. But I say these things to you so that your ear is ready, because you're going to see a presentation of a horrible, tragic, awful event for everyone involved. And there's no disputing that. And as I said earlier, we're not disputing, you won't hear any dispute as to the relationship between Brendan Banfield and Juliana Perez Magalhães. But there's an awful lot more to look for, ladies and gentlemen, and that's what I'm asking you to do.
The end of opening statements, the prosecution laid forth their theory of the case that the defendant who is on trial started having an affair with his au pair, the co-defendant, who he then took to the shooting range and took on vacations and took on romantic bike rides. And then he decided and told her that divorce wasn't an option, that he was going to murder his wife, and that they together were going to carry out that plan. Then used his wife's email address to create an account on a site to seek a role play partner, to find someone who would role play a breaking into a house and a more violent sexual encounter, and that he set that up, that he could then come into the house and shoot the intruder, say that the intruder killed his wife, and then they were taken care of. So in the opening statement, the prosecution laid out that there are both the 2 charges of murder for the victim wife, Christine, and for the third party, Joseph Ryan. There are also child endangerment related charges because the 4-year-old was in the basement while all of this was going down. And it was on the defendant's birthday, which was a very interesting turn of events. It's like, and it's on his birthday. The defense spent most of his opening statement talking about the co-defendant, that the co-defendant was going to go to trial, that the co-defendant was arrested more than a year prior to this defendant being arrested, that the co-defendant was still in close communication with the defendant while she was in custody, that she was telling him that the prosecution wanted her to take a deal and wanted to do anything to get him and wanted her to say things that weren't true. And essentially that through her attorney continuing the case, the prosecution wore her down into taking a deal. And then the defendant got arrested in November 2024. The co-defendant lost hope and was like, yeah, you know what? I'll take a deal. And so he didn't directly call the co-defendant a liar, but he did say that she was incentivized to take a deal and that he understands why somebody would, but pay close attention to her testimony. He also then tried to liken Fairfax County to Norfolk County and said that in the homicide detectives unit, of all the people that were there, most of them have now been transferred, and that there was some disagreement over a quote unquote catfish theory, and that there was a disagreement over digital forensics. But then he said our digital expert agrees with their digital expert. We will see. The prosecution said you don't have to just believe the au pair because the physical evidence is going to match or support what she says, me paraphrasing the opening. And the defense says we've got a lot of information coming, but all of it is sus. And at the very beginning, which was interesting because the defense opening was a bit more wandering, it was not well synthesized. He did say that the murder of Christine Banfield was done by, and he called him Joe Ryan. So he is going with this person broke into the house and murdered Christine Banfield at 7 o'clock in the morning or after 7 o'clock in the morning. So we'll see.
When we were in the ambulance, it transported us to Reston Hospital.
And when you arrived at the hospital, did he still have blood on his hands when you escorted him into the hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
Was he handcuffed when you escorted him into the hospital?
No, ma'am.
Was he handcuffed at any point that morning?
No, ma'am.
And what, if anything, did you see him do while you were in the hospital room with him?
He washed his hands.
And before he washed his hands, had anyone swabbed his hands to preserve samples of blood that were on his hands?
No, ma'am.
Why'd you let him wash his hands?
I felt bad for him blowing his nose and wiping his face with his bloody hands.
And what, if anything, did you do next?
I assisted with any.
I understand that it has to be difficult when you don't know what happened at a scene, you don't know what everybody is doing, and he's saying, look, he stabbed her, I shot him, but you still have to process the people at the scene. I get it. I felt bad for him. I get it. But he still has to be processed as if he is a suspect, even if he's not. We were at lunch on day one of the Banfield trial, and we went through numerous law enforcement first responders and body cam footage that the jury saw, that we heard, and talking about going through the response to the house, establishing that the victim, Joseph Ryan, would have been DOA. Law enforcement was like, I don't even know what to do here. Apparent gunshot wound to the head and chest, no pulse. Then talking about Christine Banfield and the fact that she was breathing, and then trying to perform life-saving measures on her while waiting for paramedics to arrive, saying that she was removed from the house as quickly as possible once paramedics got there. Then the defendant was put into another ambulance and checked. After he was checked, he was searched. He had 2 cell phones. He had multiple gun magazines on his belt, handcuffs. He let law enforcement know that one of the weapons in the bedroom was his duty weapon. That was the one with a flashlight, that the other one was not. That he went to the hospital after, and then after the doctors told him his wife had passed, that he was crying. And that's when one of the officers let him wash his hands at the hospital at that point. That he had identified himself to law enforcement as the shooter. And then we heard the last officer that testified in the morning talk about why he had asked the defendant to go sit in the bathtub, and talking about it being kind of a small space with a lot of law enforcement trying to control that scene. But what was interesting from that last witness is that he discussed that he noted in the bedroom that blood had soaked into the carpet, that some of the blood was drying in areas and some of it was starting to clump or clot. And so there was some brief discussion about that on cross-examination. Leonard, a quick minute to thank our sponsor for today, Shopify. Not only has Shopify been a great partner as a sponsor, but the Leonard shop wouldn't be up and running were it not for Shopify, because I built the Leonard shop way back in the day, it feels like now, when all of you were like, do we have merch? And we're like, we can. So if you're ready to launch a new business, or you just want to streamline an existing business, Shopify has you covered. Shopify gives you everything you need to sell both online and in person, which makes it stand out. So it's no wonder that millions of entrepreneurs already use Shopify. And you know how you can tell? Well, if you have the Shop app, you can log in to most of the places you're already shopping with Shop Pay. And it's so easy. Shopify stores aren't cookie cutter. You can choose from hundreds of beautiful templates, and you can customize them to match your brand, your style, and they're easy to change as you grow. Plus, Shopify's super easy to set up, and all the connections you need to make to sell on social are handled right in the back end of Shopify. So if you're ready to get started or you're ready to grow, Shopify will grow with you. It's why it's been our choice since the beginning for the Leonard shop. So Leonard, in 2026, stop waiting and start selling with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period and start selling today at shopify.com/Leonard. Just head to shopify.com/Leonard, shopify.com/Leonard, and you're going to start hearing this sooner than you think. Thank you, Shopify. Now let's get back to the case brief.
So you began a sexual relationship with the defendant in August of 2022 when you were how old?
I was 21.
And when this relationship began, did you ever think about how it might end?
No, I didn't really think it was serious, a relationship.
And did the defendant ever talk with you about any long-term plans for the two of you?
Not initially.
Not initially. Did he ever, though?
Yes.
When did that talk start?
I think he started after he talked about his plan.
Did he ever talk to you about anything else about his relationship? Did he ever talk about getting a divorce with her?
No, he basically said divorce was not an option.
Did he say why?
Money was involved.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Money.
Okay. Anything else?
Money was involved in Valerie's custody too.
And what about those things? Did he say anything specifically about money or Valerie's custody?
Yeah, he said that he didn't want to have to share Valerie with Christine, that she wasn't good for Valerie. So he wanted to have Valerie full time.
So he didn't want to get divorced. Did he tell you what he wanted to do?
Yes.
What did he say?
He mentioned his plan to get rid of her.
And you said he mentioned his plan to get rid of her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When did he talk about that first?
I would say it was in October 2022.
What, if anything, did he give you in that morning before the two of you left?
Gun.
What kind of gun?
It's a handgun.
And what did you do with that?
I put it in my pocket, in my sweater.
And what were you supposed to do?
I was supposed to stay in the car with Valerie to put something on her iPad for her to watch. And as soon as I saw Jariah pulling up the driveway, I was supposed to give Christina a call, but her phone would be off, it would go to voicemail, and I was supposed to call him right away and tell him there was somebody strange coming to the house, and that I was scared.
So you left Valerie in the basement, and you said you went upstairs?
Mm-hmm. And he took his gun out, and because I also had the gun with me, I just did the same, and he proceeded to go upstairs, and I just followed him upstairs to the master bedroom. And so from my point of view, all I could see was like Joe. At the moment I knew it was Joe, like on top of Christine, in a way I'll describe holding her down. And that was my first view as soon as I get into the bedroom.
Did anyone say anything when the two of you went into the bedroom?
Yeah, when I got to the bedroom, Brendan said, he yelled, "Police officer." And Christine's first reaction, that was the first time I heard she say anything at that point. And she yelled back at Brendan, saying, "Brendan, he has a knife." And yeah, that's when Brendan first shot Joe.
What did you see Brendan do next?
When I was bringing him the towel, he got on top of her, and that's when I first saw him stabbing her with a knife.
Where on her body was he stabbing her?
Her neck.
Did you stab Christine at all?
I did not.
Did you touch Christine at all at this point?
No.
Did you get any blood on you?
I did.
And how did you get blood on you?
The blood on my hands, I remember, because at some point when he was stabbing her, I was kneeling, like, she was here, and Brenda was like stabbing her, and I came closer, and it was right here, and I knelt on the carpet, and I had put my hands on the carpet, and as soon as I felt blood, I just removed my hands from the carpet.
How did you get blood on your shoes?
Walking around, I would say, freaking out, and I was pacing back and forth, and it was pacing and staying in place, covering my eyes and ears, and I didn't want to hear their conversation, and so I don't truly know like how I got blood on my socks.
Why was it that you went to the safe?
Huh?
Why did you go to the safe?
Because it was also part of his plan, and for reasons I can't make sense of them now, given that I had the gun with me that morning.
You went to the safe, came back. What did you do at that point?
At that point, that's when I stand in front of the dresser and the TV, and I'm telling Brendan that Joe is moving. He was moving, and Brendan, he doesn't have any reaction to that whatsoever. And I just start telling him he's moving, he's behind you, and that's when I fired the shot too.
That's when could you say that again?
I fired
And when you say you fired what?
a gun.
That was certainly a full day of court as we are going through day one of the Banfield trial that is currently underway, though it has moved pretty quickly in real time. So we are going to be zooming to catch up tomorrow because there was only one witness on day two of this trial. And we might just summarize day three so we can catch up in real time, because day three is a lot of scientific evidence and I might be able to just consolidate that. There were some changes in the way that the co-defendant testified when you got to her relaying what happened once she got into the bedroom where Joe Ryan and Christine Banfield were, when she says Brandon Banfield shot Joe and then stabbed Christine. She was describing what she was doing during that time. I think there's some information missing in her description of what she was doing and how she ended up with blood on her clothes and her shoes and her socks. When we're getting to the fact that she's saying that Brandon Banfield told her to take off her shoes to go to the safe, it would seem to me that he was thinking about, if the safe was dusted for prints, somebody had to get the gun out of the safe. And he said to her, my hands are covered. That's what her testimony was. But if there's bloody footprints in your shoes leading to the safe, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And coming into the bedroom, already having guns, also doesn't make a whole lot of sense if the guns are kept in a safe in the bedroom. So while she was saying I was confused because I already had the gun, he might have been thinking about the investigation. And in a lot of her testimony, she talked about what she says the defendant told her about the investigation. We need to get new phones because of the investigation. They can track back your phone, even if you reset it. New iCloud accounts, because they can track back even if you delete things. New iCloud accounts, new phones. He told her he needed to change his routine so it wouldn't seem suspicious. Do you believe that he told her these things? And that's what the jury's going to have to decide. I don't necessarily know if she's sitting there going, yeah, he's going to need to change his pattern of leaving for work and leave for work earlier, so it makes sense that he's in a McDonald's 6 minutes away so he can get back faster. The testimony leading up to them going into the bedroom tracked much more easily for me. There is information missing when they got into the bedroom. We'll see if more comes out on cross. All of the leading up to them getting into the bedroom where the murders happen and the amount that she says he's telling her about the investigation tracks for me. Also, he identifies himself as a federal agent, as a police officer, but he is an investigator. He is a sworn peace officer, even though he is an investigator for the IRS. And yes, the IRS has sworn peace officers. So when he's talking about, no, if I don't change my pattern of life, do I think that most 20-year-olds would think of that? No, I don't. The leading up information was interesting, and it's just going to depend on if the jury believes her. If the jury believes that she's downplaying things, I don't know if that necessarily undermines her testimony. I'm sure they're going to want to hear more about her deal, because all of you have been asking me about it all day long in the chat. What about her deal? Because it came up in opening and it hasn't come up yet. I think if I was the prosecutor, I might have led with it and just get it out of the way. Why did you agree to talk to us? Why did you agree to tell us what he did? What did you get for that? And then say, is what you're telling us here the truth? They might end with it, but it was on a lot of y'all's mind. And I imagine it's been on the jury's mind too. Like, okay, but then what? Because when we break for the day on her testimony, we are at her talking to law enforcement and saying that she was telling them the story that Brandon told her. That was going to be the story to tell police. That was going to be the story to tell law enforcement. The question that I have is, how much did Brandon tell her? How much did he not tell her? And how much was he planning for Joe and potentially Juliana to be the fall people, to distance things as much as it can from him? And to some point, it worked for a substantial period of time, because he wasn't arrested for almost a year, or no, over a year after she was arrested. So it took them longer to develop evidence on him. I think he probably didn't anticipate that she would flip on him, but she did. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss updates on your favorite cases, you're going to need the LawNerd app at lawnerd.app.com. That way you can stay in the loop on the cases that matter most to you, and you never know when you're going to catch feelings for a new case. So make sure you get it for free on iOS and Android. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a Law Nerd.